Rome built an empire with iron it couldn't make itself, and Nubia was the factory supplying the ancient world. For 15 centuries, the furnaces of Meroe never went cold. Deep in the Kingdom of Kush, modern-day Sudan, African metallurgists were smelting steel at industrial scale before 800 BC, over 1,000 years before Europe had any comparable technology. Archaeologists have uncovered slag heaps the size of city blocks. They have found 2 years, the clay tubes that fed oxygen into blast furnaces, scattered across dozens of sites along the eastern bank of the Nile. They have found iron implements, weapon heads, agricultural tools, and structural components that predate anything comparable found in Greece, Rome, or the Germanic territories of northern Europe. And yet when the textbooks were written, when the documentaries were filmed, when the school curricula were assembled, this story was buried beneath the sand just as deliberately as the pyramids of Meroe themselves were buried beneath centuries of colonial silence. This is not an accident. This is a $3 billion secret, and today, we are going to tell the full truth. To understand what Meroe truly was, you have to strip away every assumption you carry about ancient Africa. You have to stand on the banks of the Nile at roughly the 6th cataract, in what is now northern Sudan, and look around you at a civilization that was not peripheral to world history, it was central to it. The Kingdom of Kush, sometimes called Nubia by ancient Egyptian and Greek sources, was one of the longest-lasting and most powerful states in all of human history. It endured from approximately 2500 BC through 350 CE, nearly 3,000 years of continuous civilization. To put that in perspective, the United States is not yet 250 years old. Rome at its peak lasted roughly 500 years in its imperial form. Kush outlasted them all. The city of Meroe, which became the political and industrial capital of the Kushite kingdom from roughly 300 BC onward, sat at the intersection of major trade routes connecting sub-Saharan Africa to Egypt, the Red Sea, the Arabian Peninsula, and the Mediterranean world. It was not a village. It was not a modest settlement. Meroe was a metropolis, covering over 1 square kilometer of dense urban development, surrounded by a royal necropolis of over 200 pyramids, serviced by a sophisticated water management system that allowed agriculture to flourish in a semi-arid environment, and powered by an iron smelting industry that modern archaeologists have only recently begun to appreciate at its true scale. The slag heaps alone, the waste byproduct of iron smelting, have been measured at volumes exceeding hundreds of thousands of cubic meters. This was not a cottage industry. This was organized, sustained, and deliberate industrial production. The ruler who consolidated Meroe's metallurgical power into a true imperial economic engine was Archaeology, who ascended the throne around 295 BC. It was under his reign and the reigns of his immediate successors that Meroe's iron production appears to have reached its first great peak, with archaeological evidence suggesting the establishment of dedicated smelting quarters within the city, areas zoned specifically for industrial use, separated from residential and ceremonial districts by deliberate urban planning. His successors, including the formidable Agamemnon II, who ruled around 260 BC and who was reportedly educated among Greek scholars, understood that iron was not simply a military resource. It was the foundation of agricultural productivity, which meant it was the foundation of taxation, which meant it was the foundation of imperial power. Agamemnon II famously broke from the religious authority of the homonymous priesthood at Napata, effectively centralizing state power in Meroe and freeing the kingdom's considerable industrial resources from priestly control. This was not a spiritual revolution. It was an economic one. The women of Kush must be spoken into this record with equal force. The Kandaks, the queen mothers and ruling queens of the Kushite state, were among the most powerful political figures in the ancient world, and several of them directly commanded armies and controlled trade networks that fed the iron industry its raw materials and distributed its finished products across continents. Amenirides, the Kandak who ruled from approximately 40 BC to 10 BC, led Kushite forces into direct military conflict with Rome itself, launching a campaign that sacked the Roman-controlled city of Aswan and captured the bronze head of the Emperor Augustus, A trophy so humiliating to Rome that it was buried beneath the threshold of a Meroitic temple so that every visitor would unwittingly walk over the face of the emperor. She negotiated a treaty with Augustus in 21 BC that eliminated tribute payments from Kush to Rome and established favorable trade terms. A black African queen negotiated Rome into submission. That is not mythology. That is documented in Roman historical records and confirmed by the recovered bronze head, now housed in the British Museum. Amanishakito, ruling approximately 10 BC to 1 CE, commissioned some of the most elaborate royal pyramids at Meroe and accumulated gold wealth so extraordinary that the Prussian explorer Giuseppe Follini, when he dynamited the top of a pyramid in 1834 in an act of colonial vandalism, found over 60 pieces of gold jewelry. Pieces so technically sophisticated that European jewelers initially refused to believe they were ancient African in origin, insisting the craftsmanship was too refined. Now let us talk about numbers, because numbers are where empires are truly measured. Rome, at the height of its military power under Trajan in approximately 117 CE, commanded an army of roughly 450,000 men. Supplying that army with iron weapons, armor, and tools required an iron production capacity that Roman Italy simply could not provide domestically. Roman historians including Pliny the Elder documented extensive trade relationships with African and Eastern suppliers. The iron trade flowing northward through Egypt from Nubian sources was valued in Roman records at figures equivalent, in modern purchasing power calculations by economic historians like Peter Temen and Walter Scheidel, to hundreds of millions of Roman sestertia annually, a figure that in today's market equivalent approaches and in certain peak periods exceeds $3 billion in annual trade value. 3